I walked into the basement and heard my wife whisper to her coworker. He genuinely believes my tears were real. Oscar-worthy, right? Her coworker snorted. You deserve a bonus for that performance. I grabbed a box pretending not to care. 8 days later, her coworker sent me a meme captioned, Clown of the Year. I, 42 male, my wife, 38 female, was crying to me about how stressed she was at work. I comforted her and believed every word. A week later, I overheard her whispering to her coworker that she faked it all and laughed about it. Then he sent me a meme, Clown of the Year. I don't know how to even begin processing this. I was in the basement getting out some winter clothes when I heard Mireille on the phone upstairs, whispering in a way that made me freeze. I thought she was upset again. She'd been crying the week before, telling me how overwhelmed and burned out she felt. I held her. I had told her she didn't have to go through it alone. But that day, I heard her say, he genuinely believes my tears were real. Oscar-worthy, right? And then a man's voice laughed and replied, you deserve a bonus for that performance. I stood there holding a box, staring at the wall for I don't know how long. I didn't say anything. I didn't confront her. I just walked back upstairs like nothing happened. 8 days later, that same coworker sent me a meme captioned, Clown of the Year. I've never felt so foolish, so used, so small. But I need to tell the full story because I can't keep it in anymore. I'm Callum. I'm 42, and I live in Portland, Oregon. I teach middle school science, have for nearly 18 years. My wife, Mireille, is 38. She's been in communications and PR for a while, currently working for a mid-sized tech firm. She's always been career-driven. Sharp dresser, always on her phone, very social. We've been married almost 9 years. No kids, not because we couldn't, just, it never felt like something she wanted, and I guess I eventually convinced myself I didn't either. Our life was predictable, comfortable. We weren't flashy people. We had routines. Saturday morning pancakes, walking our dog through Laurelhurst Park, long drives to the coast when the city felt claustrophobic. I thought that meant we were solid. That quiet stability meant something real. The cracks, as they often do, showed up slowly. About 6 months ago, Mireille started getting more distant. Not cold, exactly, just unreachable in subtle ways. She was glued to her phone, even more than usual. Always texting, always smiling at something she wouldn't share. I chalked it up to work. That's what it usually was. She managed multiple teams, had deadlines, pressure, all of it. Then, 2 months ago, she came home looking like the world had collapsed on her. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes red. I rushed to her, and she collapsed into my chest and just sobbed. She said her boss had humiliated her in a meeting, that there was some political shift happening at the company, and she felt like she was being pushed out. She kept saying she didn't know who she was anymore. I didn't ask many questions. I didn't want to make her feel worse. I just listened, held her, told her she wasn't alone. She was my wife, my partner. I believed every single word she said. That night, she wanted to watch something comforting, so we put on Parks and Rec reruns. She curled up next to me and laughed at the same jokes we'd heard 100 times. And I remember thinking, this is the stuff that makes it through the hard times. This is what love looks like. A week later, I found myself in the basement, looking for a bin of winter coats, when I heard her voice upstairs through the floor vent. I was about to call up to her when I caught the tone in her voice. Low, smirking. She really thinks I believe that crap? I remember thinking. Then I heard her say it. He genuinely believes my tears were real. Oscar-worthy, right? Followed by a man's chuckle. You deserve a bonus for that performance. I stood completely still. The basement was freezing, but I felt like I was burning. I remember setting down the box and just staring at the furnace like it might offer me some kind of answer. My brain tried to tell me I misheard, that it couldn't mean what it sounded like. But my gut knew. I felt something sink inside me, something quiet and heavy. I didn't confront her that day, or the next. I just observed. She was still herself, mostly. Still smiling when she texted. Still working late. Still kissing me goodbye in the mornings. But now, all I could see was how well she was performing. About a week later, I got a message from a random number. No text. Just a meme. A sad clown under the rain. Captioned, Clown of the Year. At first, I didn't even understand what it was. Then the pieces clicked. The number wasn't saved in my phone, but I looked through Mireille's open laptop that evening and found it in her recent calls. His name was Levi. He worked in strategic partnerships at her company. I hadn't met him before. I wasn't +1 material at most of her events. She said they were just work things. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I opened up our shared iCloud account, one we hadn't used in years but was still technically linked to her devices. It didn't take much to find synced backups. Texts, photos, voicemails. What I found made me sick. I didn't have to dig far. Their messages were constant. Long threads of flirting, jokes, nasty jabs about me. They used nicknames for me, the substitute, the background noise, Mr. Cardigan. I always wore cardigans to work. There were photos too. Her in our bed. Him in our bed. The same bedsheets I'd washed just days earlier. I don't remember crying. I just felt numb. like my body had turned into drywall. And yet, I still didn't confront her. Not immediately, because once I saw the truth, I knew I couldn't just react. I needed to think, to protect myself. So I started planning. I didn't eat much that week. I'd sit at the table in front of a bowl of cereal that would turn soggy before I even touched it. I still went to work, still taught my 7th graders about cell division, volcanoes, or Newton's laws, because honestly, it was easier than being home. At work, I could pretend to be the calm, even-keeled Mr. Lowry who always had a dry joke or a weird science fact to make the kids laugh. But the moment I walked through our front door, I was playing defense. Watching, listening, pretending not to know. Mireille was good. I'll give her that. She was warm when she wanted to be, distant when it suited her. She'd ask about my day, offer to pick up groceries, complain about coworkers, but never Levi. Not once. He didn't exist in her home world, which, in hindsight, was probably the cleanest way to separate her lives. I wasn't ready to confront her yet. I needed more time. Not just to gather proof, but to process it. Because the truth is, I didn't just lose trust, I lost identity. The version of myself I had built around this life, this marriage, this person, it all felt like paper held too close to a flame. So I started moving things quietly. I created a new bank account at a local credit union. Switched my paycheck direct deposit over. She didn't notice, probably too focused on her own world. I rented a small storage unit on the east side and told her it was for clearing out clutter. What I was really doing was building an escape hatch. I moved important documents, birth certificates, tax records, the deed to the house. Packed up my late mother's photo albums and a few boxes of books she'd gifted me over the years. I even grabbed the old ceramic mug she painted in 1994 that I still used for morning coffee. The little things. The irreplaceable. During all this, I was also talking to a lawyer, a woman named Cheryl who came recommended by an old friend. She was sharp, patient, and direct. Oregon's a no-fault divorce state, but she explained that documentation of infidelity could still influence spousal support and settlement details. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity, dignity, a way out that didn't leave me gasping. Every now and then, Mireille would pick up on something, ask why I seemed distracted, why I didn't initiate anything in bed anymore. I'd just say I was tired, stressed, trying to get through the school year. She'd accept that. She wanted to believe she was still fooling me. I think that's what kept her so casual about it. She liked the idea that she was pulling it off, that she was the smarter one. And maybe she was, for a while. But the arrogance of someone who believes they're untouchable? That's where they mess up. It was a Wednesday night when I saw the opportunity one didn't know I'd been waiting for. I'd just gotten out of the shower, and she was sitting on the couch, earbuds in, laughing at something on her phone. She didn't notice me at first. I walked past casually, and from the corner of my eye, I saw it. She was watching a video of herself and Levi. She laughed, rewound it, and watched it again. That was it for me. I walked into the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and just stared at the floor. My heart wasn't even racing anymore. It was like it had surrendered to a quiet kind of death. I didn't sleep that night. Again. But the next day, I was done pretending. I printed out the message logs. Not everything, just enough. A few screen captures. One photo. A selection of the ugliest quotes. I put them in a manila folder and sealed it with a paperclip. No drama. No theatrics. When she got home, I was already at the kitchen table. Calm. Empty. She walked in, tossed her bag on the counter, and started telling me about some new software update at work. She wasn't even looking at me. I said her name once, softly. She stopped mid-sentence. I slid the folder toward her. Said nothing. She sat down slowly. Opened it. I watched her eyes flick from word to word, photo to photo. Her mouth stayed shut, but her throat moved, like she was trying to swallow a stone. She finally spoke, voice brittle. You went through my phone? I didn't reply to that. I just looked at her. She glanced back at the folder, then at me again, as if trying to calculate what I knew, how deep the damage went. Callum, I can explain. I held up a hand. Not in anger, just to stop the noise. Don't. I know everything. I've known for weeks. Silence. The kind that fills a house, crawls into the corners. So what now? She said, barely above a whisper. I stood up, picked up my jacket from the chair. Now, I said, you leave the house. Temporarily. I've already spoken to a lawyer. The papers will be filed soon. She didn't move at first. Just sat there, stunned, as if she hadn't thought this could actually fall apart. But I could see it, the crumbling. The performance ended. You can't just, Mireille, I said, turning at the door. You had a choice. Over and over. This is just the consequence of catching up. And then I walked out. Not dramatically. Just walked. Down the street. Past our neighbors' yards. Into the city. Into myself. I didn't go far that night. Just walked through the neighborhood in the cool dark, hands in my jacket pockets, feeling like a ghost in my own life. Everything looked the same. People watering lawns, porch lights glowing, the smell of someone grilling in the distance. But I felt like I was looking at it all from behind a pane of glass. Like I was here, but not in it anymore. I ended up sitting on a bench at Laurelhurst Park for almost 2 hours. I just sat there, staring out at the trees, watching the wind push the leaves around like they were trying to go somewhere, but couldn't decide where. My phone buzzed a few times. I didn't look. By the time I came back, Mireille was gone. She'd taken a small overnight bag in her car. No note. No message. Just silence, like a room emptied in a hurry. I walked through the house and realized how loud that silence was. It was the first time in years the place felt mine again. Not warm. Not safe. Just mine. I locked the door behind me and stood in the living room for a long time, staring at the picture frames she hadn't taken down yet. One of them was from our trip to Cannon Beach, probably 5 years ago. I remember she had been cold that day, and I gave her my jacket, even though the wind off the water was sharp enough to sting. She smiled for the photo anyway. Teeth, eyes, the whole bit. I looked at that photo and felt nothing, which scared me more than if I'd felt rage. Because anger meant I still wanted something back. But I didn't. I spent the next few days handling the logistics. Called Cheryl, the lawyer, and told her to move forward with filing. She was efficient. Told me to expect paperwork within the week. Gave me the rundown of next steps, what to say and not say if Mireille got combative, and when to expect mediation to be scheduled. I told my principal I'd be taking a few personal days. No one asked too many questions. I think they assumed it was family-related, maybe health stuff. I appreciated not having to explain. Inside, I was still unraveling. Slowly, I found myself scrubbing the kitchen counters at 2 a.m., deep cleaning baseboards, going through drawers I hadn't opened in years. There's something about betrayal that makes you want to reclaim control in the dumbest, tiniest ways. Like if I could just make the silverware drawer neat, I could make sense of what had happened. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the rewriting of history. I kept replaying moments that once felt real. Her birthday was 3 years ago, when I made that lemon tart she liked. The time she got a promotion and cried, saying she couldn't have done it without me. Christmas mornings. Shared inside jokes. Her reaching for my hand at the farmer's market. All of it now felt tainted. Like I'd been tricked. Not just by her, but by my own belief that we were solid. That we were partners. And then came the messages. Not from her at first. From Levi. He sent a second meme. This time it was a cartoon clown taking off a sad mask to reveal a broken one underneath. No caption. Just that. I stared at it for a while, trying to decide what response would make me feel better. A threat? A sarcastic comeback? Silence. I chose silence. Then, a day later, he texted again. Didn't mean for it to happen this way. Sorry you found out like that. I didn't reply. A few hours later, Mireille finally messaged. Can we talk? Just once. Not about getting back together. Just to say what needs to be said. I stared at that message for a long time. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want closure, not from her. But part of me was curious. What did she think she still needed to say? What story would she try to spin now that the curtain had dropped? I agreed to meet, but set the rules. Neutral ground. Middle of the day. Public place. We met at a little cafe on Hawthorne. One we used to go to sometimes on Sunday mornings. Back when that kind of thing still felt like routine instead of acting. She looked tired. Not put together like usual. No eyeliner. Hair up in a messy bun. Sweater too big for her. I almost didn't recognize her. She sat down and didn't say anything at first. Just wrapped her hands around a mug of tea like it was keeping her upright. Then she started talking. She said she never meant to hurt me. That she didn't plan the affair. That it just happened. That she'd been feeling invisible, unappreciated, stagnant. All the greatest hits. I listened. Not because I believed her, but because I wanted to hear how far she'd go to make herself feel better. She said the tears that night, the ones I heard her mock later, were real in the moment. That she was crying about herself, not me. About what she thought she was losing in life, not who. I almost laughed. She asked if I hated her. I told her I didn't. Because hate is a rope that still ties you to someone. I told her I just didn't care anymore. That landed. I saw it in her face. We didn't talk long. I let her say what she needed to say. Let her try to give herself a version of events where she wasn't the villain. I nodded in the right places. But I didn't give her much else. When we stood up to leave, she said, I hope one day you can forgive me. I didn't answer. Because the truth is, forgiveness isn't what I'm working toward. I'm working toward peace. And sometimes peace means not carrying the burden of understanding someone who never valued you in the first place. After that cafe meeting, I didn't hear from her for a while. I think she understood that whatever chance she had to control the narrative was gone. She had said her piece, and I hadn't given her much back. No validation. No comfort. No signs of hope. Just a quiet, steady distance. That, more than anything, probably shook her. Because Mireille had always been someone who lived in control of perception, how people saw her, responded to her. But when you're stripped of your audience, when there's no one left clapping, you realize how much of your identity is built on applause. The next few weeks were dull in the way grief is dull. Life became procedural. I woke up, made coffee, feed the dog, went to work, came home, ate whatever requires the least effort. watched something to fill the silence, slept, or tried to. I didn't want to talk to anyone, not even friends. I lied to a couple of them and said Mireille was on an extended work trip. One of them, Darren, a guy I used to hike with, saw through it right away. He didn't push, just invited me to go fishing up near Trillium Lake one weekend. I said I'd think about it. I didn't go. I wasn't ready to explain. It wasn't a shame. It was exhaustion. Retelling the story meant reliving it, and I already did that enough every time I closed my eyes. The divorce proceedings started to roll forward. Most of it was handled by lawyers. Cheryl was methodical, precise. Mireille didn't contest anything. I think she knew she didn't have a leg to stand on, especially after the evidence I compiled. She moved into a rental not far from her work and sent over her forwarding address like it was just another HR document. I boxed up the rest of her things and left them in the garage. She picked them up one day when I wasn't home. I know because I came back and they were gone. No message, no drama, just an empty shelf. The house felt bigger after that. Not in a good way, just emptier. I started noticing how many things were hers. The throw pillows, the candle holders, the wall art with scripted quotes. I took some of them down, not in anger, just because they didn't mean anything to me anymore. I replaced them with nothing at first. The space needed to breathe. One night, I was sitting on the back porch, just nursing a glass of scotch and watching the rain come down. Oregon rain hits differently when you're hollow inside. It doesn't cleanse anything. It just reminds you you're soaked. That night, I let myself feel it. All of it. Not just the betrayal, but the collapse of years of my life. The quiet sacrifices I made. The little ways I contorted myself to keep peace. The compromises that, at the time, didn't feel like much, until they added up into a man who wasn't sure who he was without someone else defining the edges of his life. And as bitter as it sounds, I realized something. Mireille didn't just cheat on me. She undermined me. Subtly. Over time. With words disguised as jokes. With eye rolls I brushed off. With compliments that were always backhanded. She softened the ground beneath me long before she set the fire. And I let her. That was the part that hurt the most. Not that she lied, but I ignored the things that didn't feel quite right. I'd chosen peace over truth. Comfort over confrontation. And in doing so, I'd left myself wide open. One afternoon, a few weeks after everything went public between us, our friends and families finally knew. I got a letter from her. Handwritten. 6 pages. She apologized again. Said therapy was making her see how she'd hampered her life. Claimed Levi wasn't in it anymore. That it had burned out fast after I found out. She wrote that she hoped I remembered the good times. That I knew I had been a safe place for her. That she regretted how she handled things, but not everything about us. I read it once. Folded it. Didn't respond. What was there to say? I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was just tired. She had spent 6 pages trying to untangle herself from her actions, to carve out a space in my memory where she could still be someone worth missing. But I had already started realizing something else. I didn't miss her. I missed the person I thought she was. There's a difference. Because when someone shows you who they are, not just in a single mistake, but in a sustained pattern, you have to stop mourning the illusion. That's what I was doing now. Not grieving a person, but letting go of a version of my life that never really existed. And that was a much slower kind of pain. Months passed. Fall crept into Portland, crisp and damp. The leaves turned rust and gold. The city felt quieter, and I realized I didn't miss her voice in the house anymore. I had started cooking again. Not because someone was coming home to eat with me, but because I enjoyed it. I was rediscovering small pleasures that were once background noise. I joined a local hiking group on a whim. On one of those Sunday meetups near Forest Park, I met a woman named Nora. She was a software engineer, dry humor, glasses that always slid down her nose when she laughed. Nothing romantic happened, not then. But we talked, and it was easy. I remember thinking, this is what it's like when someone listens without trying to script the conversation. She didn't know my history and didn't pity me. We just existed next to each other for a few hours, and it felt like fresh air. That's when I knew I was healing. But life has a funny way of circling back. About a year after Mireille moved out, I got an email from someone in her former company's legal department. Apparently, the anonymous tip I had sent back during the affair about her and Levi violating company policy had sparked a quiet but serious HR review. Levi had been fired shortly after. Mireille had been invited to resign shortly after that. A non-disclosure agreement and some internal hush money had kept it off LinkedIn, but the fallout had followed her. Turns out, PR circles are small. She bounced from contract to contract for a while, then started working freelance, offering personal branding consultation for startup founders and small businesses. I checked her website out of curiosity. It was polished, very her, all authentic storytelling and crafting your narrative. I laughed out loud, but that wasn't revenge. That came later. One afternoon, a local nonprofit I volunteer with, an education initiative for underserved kids, was launching a social campaign. They were looking for someone to help with copywriting and promotion. Guess who they hired? Yup, Mireille. I didn't know at first. Her name wasn't on the email thread. But about a week into the campaign, one of the directors looped her in. I saw the name and froze. I could have said nothing. Let it slide. Played nice. Instead, I forwarded the chain, quietly, to Cheryl, my lawyer. Just a short note. For your records, one of the groups I volunteer with has unknowingly hired my ex-wife, Mireille. Given her history of misconduct with nonprofits and misrepresentation on LinkedIn, I thought this might be relevant if they asked for references. That's all I said. I didn't embellish. I didn't exaggerate. Cheryl, being the absolute professional she is, didn't respond in writing. But 2 days later, I heard through the grapevine that Mireille had stepped back from the campaign. No public drama. No fiery fallout. Just quietly removed. And here's the best part. Nora, the woman from the hiking group, she'd recently started consulting for the same nonprofit. And after Mireille was gone, she and I crossed paths again. This time, we had dinner. Not as strangers. As two people who had found their way to the same place for very different reasons. We talked about books. She teased me about my ancient flip phone habits. I told her about how I once believed in things too blindly, and how I wasn't ashamed of that anymore. Just more careful now. She listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't pity me. And as we walked back to our cars, she said, "You seem like someone who's been through heck, but didn't stay there." And that right there, that was my revenge. Not the email. Not the quiet professional bruises Mireille had to carry around. Not the fact that she now floated from gig to gig trying to rebrand herself while the world remembered who she was. The real revenge was simple. I had rebuilt myself. Not bitter. Not broken. Just whole. Honest. Awake. I didn't need her to see it. I didn't need her to know. The satisfaction wasn't in her reaction. It was in the quiet, steady truth that I got out, cleaned up the mess, and learned to be someone again. Not someone's husband. Not someone's fool. Just me. And that was more than enough.